Socrates is one of the most famous philosophers in the world, and his impact on Western civilization is enormous. His teaching style, the Socratic method, is still used today, and his famous declarations, such as "the unexamined life is not worth living," will be with us forever. What few know is that Socrates was an excellent soldier and a war hero. Socrates loved his home city, Athens, and on many occasions fought to defend it. He even fought in 3 major battles of the Peloponnesian War, where he won a Medal of Valor. We will also focus on his nobility of character. Socrates treated everyone with kindness and respect. He never raised his voice or showed anyone contempt, even when attacked. Born in Athens in 469 BC, Socrates was proud to be an Athenian. Although not descended from a noble family like Plato, his father gave his son a good education: reading, writing, athletics, and music. In accordance with Athenian custom, he also taught him a trade, stone carving, but Socrates rarely worked as one. Instead, he spent his days at the Agora, the Athenian marketplace, probing people and asking questions. Socrates grew up in the district of Peloponnesian, and when he turned 18, he gained membership to the Athenian Assembly and began his mandatory military service. Socrates was famous for being born ugly, a major disadvantage while living in a society that worshipped beauty. Ancient sources tell us Socrates was exophthalmic, meaning that his eyes bulged out of his head and were not straight but focused sideways. He had a snub nose, which made him look like a pig, and a pot belly. He wore no shoes, wore one cloak, and owned practically nothing. Socrates didn't care about his outward appearance. What concerned him was the condition of his soul. He believed that people should focus on bettering themselves rather than worrying about their material well-being. He also believed that people should know who they are and have self-control. But not everyone appreciated Socrates and his views on life. In fact, many Athenians hated him. Socrates had a habit of embarrassing people, especially the rich, usually by exposing their ignorance. His criticism of politicians threatened their power, and his skepticism for democracy made him suspect to the average Athenian who loved their form of government. Playwrights like Aristophanes attacked him in his work, The Clouds, portraying Socrates as a cult leader who charged high fees to impressionable students. Plato argued that Aristophanes' personal attacks hurt Socrates' name and even contributed to his arrest in 399. Still, Socrates took personal attacks in stride, never showing anger or holding a grudge.
If the criticism is just, I must try to reform myself. If it's untrue, it doesn't matter.
Scholars have long debated whether Socrates was an atheist or not. Socrates did believe in the immortality of the soul and in the concept of intelligent design. He reasoned that the world was planned by a superior being, specifically for the betterment of humans. Socrates often said that an inner or spiritual voice guided him to become a philosopher. This mission, to ask questions, to examine life, and to help people better themselves morally, was given to him by God. Socrates kept fit by going to the gymnasium and would often say,
"A healthy body is the greatest of blessings."
He liked to dance, enjoyed drinking at parties, but was never drunk. He married later in life, well into his 60s, to a woman named Xanthippe, who gave him 3 children. He might have also been married to other women, but we're not sure. Although his marriage had its ups and downs, he was happy with Xanthippe. When it came to teaching, Socrates always preached patience and understanding. When one of his associates grew frustrated with a man who couldn't define the word courage, Socrates calmly told his associate,
"Let us teach, but not hate this man."
Socrates loved Athens. His greatest joy was walking around the city and interacting with people of all classes. He talked to farmers, bankers, sailors, carpenters, the ordinary men and women who were the foundation of the city. He loved asking questions, and most people enjoyed answering them because they felt their opinions were respected. Socrates also lived during the golden age of Athens, when the city was at its cultural, artistic, and intellectual peak. The men he knew and associated with, Pericles, Sophocles, Phidias, and Thucydides, each left their own mark on human civilization. Whether Socrates made a living as a philosopher, or if he charged his students fees, is up for debate. Plato claimed that Socrates lived in poverty and never accepted payments of any kind, but Xenophon and Aristophanes claim he was paid for teaching. What we do know for sure is that Socrates never gave a public lecture. Whatever was taught was done one-on-one. And of course, he never wrote anything. Most of what we do know comes from his famous students, Plato and Xenophon. His greatest gift, though, was his self-control. Socrates never grew angry or emotional. If someone raised their voice, he lowered his. He was kind and gentle and never depressed. Everyone who knew Socrates loved and respected him. Socrates lived during one of Greece's most violent periods, the 5th century BC. The list of conflicts included the Persian Wars, the Messenian Wars, the Wars of the Delian League against the Persian Empire, and of course, the Peloponnesian War. Socrates was duty-bound to protect Athens, especially when the city was at war almost every other year. Socrates was a decorated war hero. This is an important point because it not only gave him celebrity status, but street credibility, which allowed him to ask questions with impunity. We don't have definitive proof, but there's a good chance Socrates saw combat during the Samian War of 439, a conflict between Athens and the island of Samos. Since Socrates was in his late 20s, and all Athenian males between 18 and 30 had to perform military service, he probably served in some capacity. What we do know for sure is that Socrates fought in 3 major battles. The first was the Battle of Potidaea in 432, where Socrates showed great courage. The city-state of Potidaea was a tribute-paying member of the Athenian Empire, but a colony of Corinth. To block Corinthian influence in the area, the Athenians attacked the city. The siege of Potidaea would be one of the main events that led to the Peloponnesian War. As for Socrates' bravery, Alcibiades, the famous aristocratic playboy who played a major role in the Peloponnesian War, was an eyewitness. During a heated battle where both men distinguished themselves, Alcibiades was wounded. It was Socrates who stood over him and pushed back the enemy, saving his life. According to Alcibiades, Socrates was a capable fighter who could handle himself in battle. In fact, with his stocky build and fighting ability, soldiers tended to avoid him. He also said that Socrates never complained, never tired, never showed discomfort, even when walking barefoot in the snow. For saving Alcibiades' life, Socrates earned a Medal of Valor. Next, Socrates fought in a major battle during the Peloponnesian War. It was at the Battle of Delium in 424, where he distinguished himself by protecting soldiers during a retreat. During the fierce battle, an unexpected Boeotian cavalry charge broke the will of the Athenian line and scattered its men. This left the Boeotian army in control of the battlefield and forced the main Athenian army to retreat. An Athenian general named Laches commended Socrates for his bravery.
I have seen Socrates maintain not only his father's, but also his country's name. He retreated alongside me at Delium, and I am telling you that if the others had acted like him, the honor of our city would have been upheld, and the great defeat would never have occurred.
Scholars believe it was Socrates' heroism at the Battle of Delium that made him a household name in Athens. Socrates also fought at the Battle of Amphipolis in 422. Amphipolis was a strategic city close to the gold and silver mines of Thrace. The city surrendered to the Spartans in 423, costing the historian Thucydides his command and forcing him into exile. In 422, the Athenians tried to take back Amphipolis, but were defeated by the Spartans. Socrates was there as a hoplite aged 48. He was still in good shape, capable, and above all, very brave. This was his last known battle. Socrates also showed great composure during the trial of the generals in 406. The trial took place after the Battle of Arginusae, one of the last major conflicts of the Peloponnesian War. The Athenians won the battle, but some of their ships were sunk and a storm blocked any rescue attempts. Incensed, the family members of the dead soldiers wanted all the generals put to death, even though it was unconstitutional. As president of the assembly, Socrates declared that he would
do nothing that was contrary to the law,
and he refused to put the measure to a vote. Eventually, through threats and bribes, a vote was taken, and all 6 generals were found guilty and executed. Still, Socrates risked his life by defying the angry mob and refusing to take part in the legal farce. Socrates alone upheld the rule of law. All historical records show that Socrates was famous for his military endurance, self-discipline, and courage on the battlefield. And as a hoplite in the army, nothing seemed to bother Socrates. When supplies were low, he was impervious to hunger. When conditions were harsh, he never complained. And when a plague spread throughout the camp, including the Great Plague of Athens, Socrates was one of the few unaffected. To sum it up, Socrates was a great soldier. The Peloponnesian War ended in 404 BC when Athens surrendered to Sparta. The war nearly ruined Athens. The city was bankrupt, most of its men were dead, and the city was left in the hands of a group of 30 tyrants who had 1,500 Democrats killed. Eventually, full democracy was restored when the 30 tyrants were deposed, but those who had suffered from their rule were out for blood. The next few years was a dark time for Athens. The courts were filled with lawsuits filed by the families of the murdered victims, and anyone associated with the 30 tyrants was suspect. Looking for a scapegoat, that anger was directed at Socrates because it was his students, Alcibiades, the traitor who was responsible for the disaster in Sicily, and Critias, the leader of the 30 tyrants, who brought much pain and suffering to their city. The official charges against Socrates were:
Socrates is guilty first of not worshipping the gods whom the state worships, but introducing new and unfamiliar religious practices, and second, of corrupting the young. The prosecutor demands the death penalty.
Socrates consulted no legal experts or hired anyone to represent him. He accepted his trial as perfectly valid. Even with proper legal representation, his defense would have been difficult. He rarely spoke out against the war, at least not publicly. He was neither for the fatal expedition to Sicily or against it, nor was he for or against the suppression of democracy. This indifference, along with a close friendship with Critias, sealed his fate. A vote was taken in the assembly. Socrates was found guilty and sentenced to death. A wealthy friend offered him money to escape, but Socrates said no. He was determined to uphold the dignity of Athenian law by submitting to it. More importantly, he could not live away from Athens. Walking the streets and interacting with people was his God-given mission. To live in exile was not an option. Athens to Socrates was life. Socrates forgave the men who had him executed. He even said something remarkable at his trial.
They can kill me, but they cannot harm me.
He also said that the true philosopher has no fear of death, because God will take care of those who have lived wisely. Death, then, is to be welcomed as the natural end to our life on earth and the beginning of something infinitely more glorious. In 399 BC, Socrates died by drinking a poisonous beverage of hemlock. The jailer who administered the hemlock said Socrates was the noblest, the gentlest, and the bravest man he had ever had in his custody. If Socrates' beliefs could be summed up, it would go something like this. A man should strive to do his best, to be honest, to defend his city and obey its laws, to be curious and inquisitive, to seek the truth no matter what, and above all else, be kind and gentle to everyone.